What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Whiskey Morgue podcast, where we talk about the whiskey we're drinking, the horror we're watching. I'm your host, Mike, and tonight I am joined with some of the minds behind Filmland Spirits. I got Charlie Flint, and the official title is Master of Mystical Ops. And then I have Steve. Is it Canepa?
Canepa, yes.
Canepa. Okay, I'm Italian. I should know that a little bit better, but because I'm De
Uh,
Pice. But
it's-
and your title is Whiskey Baron, and
yeah.
I love that you guys really played up the titles, like everything when we talk about Filmland Spirits, which we're going to get into, everything down to your roles in the About You on the website is very cinematic. But can you quickly introduce yourselves and maybe very quickly how you got involved in the project, and then what these roles mean within Filmland Spirits?
Sure. You want me to
Char
go first, Steve? Yeah, okay.
yeah, Charlie.
He's just
Yeah.
like, oh,
Um,
Charlie.
right, go Charlie. Sure. So the what I really do on a day, I mean, we all kind of do a little bit of everything, honestly. We're not, a giant brand. We definitely wear a lot of hats. But as we split up duties, I'm primarily responsible for operations. So, but that said, as we'll get into, Steve and Troy and myself, we all partner on blending and those kind of things. But on a day-to-day, responsible for operations. But I'm also the creative partner. Most of the content that you see on our bottles was written by Troy and myself. The concepts come from some combination of the two of us. We can get into that a bit more. Um, and yeah, Troy and I have known each other for going on like more than 20 plus years at this point. He and I both were big whiskey fans and remain huge whiskey fans. We both had built up pretty big collections between the two of us. And started talking about, creating a brand and what that might look like. And he and I both, he still lives in Los Angeles. I'm based in Atlanta now, but going back 20 years ago, he and I both lived and worked in LA. Um, we're exploring ways that we could kind of incorporate kind of our film backgrounds into the products and just started riffing from there. And eventually our hobby turned into the product that we have today. And we're happy to dive more into that. But that's kind of my role and how I came to be in the company. Steve?
Yeah, so I met the two of them. So when we talk about Troy, he's kind of the visionary, the founder, the CEO of the company. Then I met Charlie and Troy later on after their friendship had blossomed all those years through a common friend. That was what blossomed is a good it's a good word.
I
So
like
Sure.
that.
through a common friend who knew someone who was also involved in the early days of the company, they introduced me more as potentially an investor. And and so they kind of gave me the pitch about the company, and it was a combination of just giving some advice and then maybe possibly investing in the company. Over a series of conversations, Troy and I particularly hit it off, and I
Yeah,
decided to
Steve and I
invest in the
don't get along
company.
at all.
Well, you weren't on those early calls as much. We
Just
we
kidding.
we bonded later. We'll get into that. So Troy and I hit it off, and I decided to invest in the company. But the more we talked, the more he understood that my passion for whiskey was there. And Troy and Charlie are a little bit more American centric, bourbon and rye and American whiskeys. And what Troy and I talked a lot about is my collection is a little more worldly, so Irish and Scotch and Canadian and Japanese and Indian, and we had a lot of cool conversations. So eventually, he's like, "Well, we're going to start tasting some barrels to potentially purchase for our inventory. You want to be involved in that?" And I got involved in that. But he also knew that my background was in finance. So at some point, he asked me to be the lead finance for the company. So I'm officially the CFO. I'm part of the blending team, and but more importantly, I'm these two guys' buddy, and we have a blast together.
That's awesome. So spreadsheets and tasting. That sounds
Yeah,
like a
yeah, yeah.
I don't
We
know if you
have
want to
A
do
the
them
lot
at
of
the
we
same
spreadsheets.
time, but
Yeah, so the three of us, if you think about the Venn diagram of three circles, we have a lot that intersects in the middle. And then we just have a few specialties that each one of us is probably better at than the other. Mine happens to be the number side of things. I don't know if they're not good at it or they just don't want to do it.
I'm not good at it, to be clear.
I think one of the things that like hearing a bit about it now, because other than the reading the website, I didn't know too much, but it felt organic, even just reading kind of how it came together online and hearing the story, it just really does sound like whiskey enthusiasts who then ventured off to do this. And because we've seen a ton of people come by and they're like, oh, it's whiskey. Whiskey was hot a few years ago, especially during COVID. And they're like, yeah, let's throw money at it and put anything in a bottle and hopefully we sell a bunch. And we've seen that like a lot of those companies aren't around. You guys still are, and for good reason. What was interesting that you mentioned about the Scotch background with you, Steve, is that uh, when I drank this, a friend of mine messaged me. There's always like someone on the side who's like, "Okay, you wrote a review, but like, is that how you really feel? Like tell me about how you feel." And I said, at before we jumped on, you were talking about proof a little bit, right? And I said that for me, it's easy to fall into like, yeah, let me taste this at cask strength, or let me taste it at a higher proof. And usually when someone sends you kind of like their entry into that category or bourbon, yeah, you feel like it's like watered down a bit. But this here, I mentioned that it drinks almost like a scotch, not in flavor, but how you can have a scotch at 45, 46%, and you don't feel like you're being cheated of any flavor, that it's full, it's nuanced. So interesting knowing that now that that's kind of like what you bring to the table in terms of the blending process. I'm going to pour this. I'm going to talk about that more for a second. But were you convinced? Were you all in at the beginning with the cinema side of everything? Was that for sure like off the bat you knew that this is how you wanted to create a brand?
Uh, yes. I mean, so, honestly, early on, very early on, we talked about a few different ways that we could approach it and a few different creative ideas. But they were always kind of rooted in cinema because that's our background. Kind of landing on kind of this 50s, 60s horror sci-fi aesthetic that evolved from it. And we talked about a few different things. But that was one we always kept coming back to. But no, film was pretty much always part of the conversation as we were exploring, variations of the brand. Because
Mm.
again, it was where our roots were. Troy and I had been writing partners in the past. And both worked in film and TV, particularly on his side, film and TV. So no, it was pretty much from the beginning. It was just what's it going to look like, and that evolved as we went along.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
and
I was able to play the devil's advocate because I have
nice.
no background in that. I
Mm,
have a personal love and appreciation of it, but no working background of it.
mm,
And so, as much as I understood that the reason they were doing it was to kind of change the whiskey market a little bit in terms of getting away from the old standard. If you walk down an aisle at a liquor store, everything looks the same. And it's probably the reason one of the main reasons I invested is it had to be something different. But I also every step of the way said, okay, I know you guys love that, but are you sure everybody else is going to love it?
mm.
Right.
And that's the beauty of our relationship is they never took that as an insult. They never got mad at me, but I think they appreciated that they were a little more into that and they needed someone to just check them a little bit. But the thing I liked about it was going to be very different than anything else on the shelves. And the three of us never ever compromised on what's going to go in the bottle. The three of us always had a love that, hey, the most important thing is what's inside. This outside is
Yeah.
going to be fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
the reality is that no matter how great a product it is, if you're entering the space, you're on shelves, like you said, amongst giants and these legacy distilleries, and they all have Grand Paps old recipe, and there's this heritage aspect.
Yeah.
And even when I posted this online, and I'll kind of, if you're watching the video format, I have the bottle here, the Moonlight Mayhem. I mean, people who don't even know anything about the brand right away comment like, "Whoa, what a cool label! Like it looks amazing." And I then then I encourage people to take one step further and you look at like the side of the label. There's a cast to this like concept, this movie that you guys have kind of written like this mini script for, and then you flip it one more time and we have our credit roll here. But the credit roll is just the most transparent background on what's in the bottle. So for me, it's genius, and I'm obviously severely biased because I do whiskey and horror, but it catches the eye and then it follows up with what's in there. And I mean, even just done enough interviews to know glass is one of the biggest pain in the asses and greatest expenses, especially now.
Yeah.
I see the chuckles with all the tariffs and stuff. And if you've never seen one of these bottles, I mean, it's sleek, it's beautiful, and then you even got like on the cork, it's like I believe it's a film reel itself,
Yep.
and the bottom kind of looks like that as well. Maybe you want to explain some of the bottle design.
Yeah. So to your point, the bottle is a tremendous pain in the ass, and it has been from the beginning. Yeah,
And
you know,
expensive, and expensive.
and expensive.
Spreadsheet.
Yeah. Um, but it's like we consider it a very important part of the product and the brand, right? Like, you know, like you said, what goes inside of it is critically important, but we take the bottle itself as importantly as, you know, the creative in the label. And we spent a ton of time early on designing out the bottle. We worked with a number of different manufacturers to get it right. You're right. Again, kind of holding up the bottle for anybody that might just be listening. There are different elements of it. You know, we tried to, you know, we like to we have the Filmland branding embossed across the back. That makes labeling it in production much harder because you can't just slap the label anywhere on the bottle that you want. It actually has to line up. We kind of have this kinetoscope, kind of film reel inspired bottom to it that kind of is intended to be a callback to, if you remember, like early days of film, the horse running
Yes.
in the, you know, like in the very early film tests, and that's kind of what inspired that. And then yeah, all the way down to the cork, and even the cork's honestly been a pain in the ass getting that right, just because, you know, having a high quality, like having the high quality engraving or etching into the wood turned out to not be super easy as well. And we've actually over the years sourced, you know, like worked with manufacturers pretty much all over the globe. We had the misfortune, if you will, of launching during COVID when sourcing some of these dry goods was really hard. So like getting glass during COVID was not easy at all. Getting, you know, these corks made during COVID was not easy at all. And then, of course, like you said, now we have tariff, you know, for the last few years have off and on have had tariffs. So yeah, it's not, it's definitely hasn't been easy. But again, we consider the bottle a really important part of the product. You know, there have been times when it has been super hard and we've been like, ah, man, what if we went with, you know, one of the stock bottles or something like that? And we're like, no, it's just too much a part of who we are at this point. And we, you know, we all just love the bottle. So, you know, we think it's part of the brand. We think it's part of the product. Um, but yeah, it definitely added a lot of work every step along the way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
And
Mike, and
and
Steve could probably talk
if
about the
I,
costs.
well, no, if I may, I mean, the one of the reasons that I'm so supportive of spending that money is as that devil's advocate on the thematics of it. I always knew there was going to be a fine line between really doing what we're doing and other people thinking, well, they're just trying to hide bad whiskey with a fancy label, right? And I knew that. We all knew that. No, we didn't walk into that naive. But I think a couple things were in our mind of how we can combat that. One is at some point in time, and luckily it happened right away, the stuff that's in our bottles on blind tastings will do amazing.
Mhm.
And it's done unbelievably well at San Francisco World Spirits Competition and other blind tasting events, right? So then you know the label and bottle had nothing to do with it. Now, are those the end all be all? No, but they're an important factor, and we're batting 1,000 on those. I mean, everything we do. So that's one thing. But the second thing is, if someone thinks we're just an aesthetic brand, but then they look at the detail like you did, they couldn't go, well, these guys, there's no way they're just doing this for kitsch. I mean, they are really serious about this because to spend that money on embossing the side and the top and all the detail we put into the label and all the thought we put, like that's another way to combat that idea that they're just throwing a label on a crappy product, right? So that's why I can get behind the cost of it. It's that important.
And like I said, being fortunate to have done this a few times with talking about two different brands, when I was reading what you were doing and these scripts and the details, I was like, you guys like creating a lot of work for yourselves
Yeah,
because,
yeah,
like, back to your point, if you're just trying to bottle anything or hide bad whiskey, like, there's way too much effort going on here behind the
yeah.
scenes because now you're like, oh, shit, we have a new bottle coming out. What's the aesthetic? What's the movie poster? What's the story behind this bottle? And we'll get into that a bit. But I'm thirsty because you keep talking about how this has won all these awards. I know how good it tastes. So I'm gonna pour up some of it in my Glen. So for those of you who are listening, you just have to hear me pour some whiskey and nice bottle pop. Are you guys drinking it as well? You got it?
I am. Yes, I have
Uh,
some here.
Yeah.
I'm still
we're
pouring, but I'm
we're
coming.
we're we're gonna force Charlie. It's
Yeah.
It's like, no, no, okay, fine.
All right. Well, cheers, guys. Thank you for doing this. I'm gonna dive in and
absolute
Cheers.
pleasure, Mike. It's great spending
Cheers.
time with you.
Absolutely. So I got a big pour. Good night, guys.
yeah, yeah. As soon as it went up to my nose, um, just all that beautiful you could like, just smelling those notes. Um, if you're on here and you haven't read the review that I did online or my pairing, um, this is just like quintessential bourbon turned up to 11. It brings me back to the stuff that I fell in love with. And there's just like the vanilla, cherry, toasted oak, like baking spice lingers. And again, to what I mentioned earlier, this does not taste like anything that's just been reduced or watered down by any means. So I mean, cheers to you guys for such an amazing product.
Thank you. Cheers.
So in terms of like the blending, you said that there's three of you. Is I guess maybe is there anyone else involved with blending?
Early on, we had another partner, but now it's just the three of us.
Okay, so like with something like this, we'll use the Moonlight Mayhem that we have. So before we get into it though, you have Moonlight Mayhem, Rise of the Robots. So those are the two like foundation products,
Yeah,
and then from
we
there we
have
have the.
we
Sorry, I'll
have
let you.
four foundation products. I'm sorry. So you have the one we're sampling here, Moonlight Mayhem. Then its older brother, the cast strength version of Moonlight Mayhem, and that's called extended cut. So whenever we have a cast strength, we use a movie term extended cut. You get more during the movie. You get more proof and flavors. Then we have Rise of the Robots, which is the 94 proof rye, the cousin to this one. And then there's an extended cut version of that. Then every 6, 9-ish months, we'll release a special one, and they'll be either related to those or completely separate movie idea. And we could talk about some of those later, but let's kind of
Mhm.
concentrate here. And then we could take you through kind of how we create these, Charlie and
Yeah,
I.
well, I was thinking like Moonlight Mayhem. Like, do you remember kind of like because this is going to be your first bourbon, what maybe most people are going to judge your brand on. Do you remember kind of what you were going for when blending and kind of proofing it down to this proof point?
Yeah, we did our first blending, so it has been a hot minute, right? I was thinking about it earlier. We did our first blending in November, actually. It's like the anniversary, just past the anniversary of when I think we did our first blending in November of 2021.
Yep.
And yeah, like there are certain notes, and you named most of them actually, that between the three of us, Steve used the example of a Venn diagram. And there were certain notes that we were going for, and our process back then is it's evolved some, but generally speaking, what we do is we sample a ton of barrels, individual barrels together, but we separately make notes. So each of us tries a barrel, we make a bunch of notes, and then after we do a batch of barrels, we go back through and we kind of compare notes on each of the barrels. And we're looking for certain notes, and well, in this one I got, and sometimes we agree and sometimes we disagree, but I got this out of these barrels and I got this out of that barrel. And then we'll try to, we'll play with combinations of the barrels in different test blends, to get the notes, to get the taste, to get the profile that we want. At a high level, that's the approach. I don't know, Steve, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that we do all that at cast strength. So everything Charlie just
Yeah,
described is at cast
it's a
strength.
Mm.
really good point.
Then we do the process of starting to proof it down. And we
Yep.
definitely don't want to ever have to filter it. So we didn't have a magic proof in our head for our entry level, what we're drinking here, but we didn't want to get down to a point where we'd have to filter it at all. So we were hoping we would love it at a nice kind of sweet spot of high enough that you don't have to filter it, but low enough that someone who maybe was new or hadn't tried a lot of bourbon in their life would be able to drink it and enjoy it. We knew we would have the cast strength for us and for others who like stronger stuff, but we were trying to find that sweet spot. And so we just kept, adding a little bit of water and getting it down. And we found in the low 90s those flavors that you're mentioning. they were strong and prevalent, but there wasn't a huge alcohol burn. There wasn't
Mm.
like nothing off-putting for someone who was maybe approaching it new, or they were into, bourbon for a few years. And we found it, and we loved all the flavors that we were getting and the experience. I think the experience was just as much as the flavors.
Yeah, and yeah, it doesn't taste thin at all. Like you don't feel like you're lacking. And back to my point, I think it was like almost like this reverse design that you guys did because when we talk about companies that were emerging when whiskey started picking up, or like even in the bourbon space, people were grabbing great barrels at cask strength, and if it's a great barrel, like it'll sell itself, or you just kind of start dispersing single barrels, and you're like, yeah, here it is, a 65%, and you picked some great barrels. But like to create a true business or a brand that's going to be sustainable, if you're looking long game, which again comes back to like not you're not fly by night by any means, that's trickier to create a core product and have that start off. And back to me tasting this, um, I'm curious about the extended cut, but only in the sense that like I'm already happy here. And that's from
Yeah,
someone who usually says, this needs to be higher proof, but I'm super happy with this. So it's more of a curiosity of like, oh, is it a whole other beast? I'm like, is it just amplified? I'm really curious what that tastes like, but not because I feel like I'm shorted on this end.
perfect. Yeah, and I think the other aspect we needed with this is that we felt it could be replicatable, that we can do it over and over again, right?
Mm,
Whereas with a cast strength or some of our special releases, we don't have that added pressure of we can repeat this. And like you said, we show on the label this was distilled in Indiana. Everyone knows what that means. It's MGP.
yeah.
We are not tied to MGP, but in our early days, that was a great source in a bourbon we liked. So we knew be able to buy that often. And then but we didn't want to take some crazy MGP barrels that had some really specialized flavor profile and make that into our standard 94 proof bourbon. Then we
Right.
wouldn't be able to replicate it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so we'll experiment with some other stuff and other distillers, and maybe at barrel strength we can play a little bit more. But for the Rise of the Robots 94 proof, and for the one we're having here, the Moonlight Mayhem, the other factor that adds pressure, and we've had to blend it 7 or 8 times and have like the first one we did is always in our mind. We have samples of it and we taste it before we kind of blend down, and what we say is the same or a little bit better, but it's never going to be worse than our very first one. And the very first one won a double gold at San Francisco, so it's kind of hard to
Not a bad
want to do
place to
everything else.
start. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And to your point too, I would say like the competitions. I mean, you guys have done amazing at the competitions, and where you said like the bottle's not involved, but where even on like I'm a breaking bourbon kind of guy. I feel like if in terms of like even I try not to focus doing too much of a review. Like I always give my notes, and if I don't like it, you probably won't see it on my page. So people always like, seems like you like everything you post. I'm like, well, there's a lot of things that just don't make it on my page as well.
Sure.
But they're a website that I go to. I feel like they're credible, and if anything, they're quite hard on their ratings. And seeing a lot of their reviews on what you guys have put out as well, again, just reinforces that the liquid inside the bottle is excellent. And I mean, you guys are doing something right.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
the tricky part here, though, there's a story. And I know in past interviews, the kind of common phrase has been used that the story and the liquid are the same. It's always kind of been like the chicken or the egg. So in terms of like now this becoming Moonlight Mayhem, I was wondering if like maybe Charlie, I guess you'd be able to kind of pull that one a little bit more. Where how does this story develop with the blending of your entry bourbon?
Yeah, I mean, going all the way back to Moonlight Mayhem, which is going back a few years at this point. Again, we had. I'm trying to remember if it was chicken or egg that came first on Moonlight Mayhem specifically.
I think
The
Troy's talked about, Charlie, just to refresh your memory. I don't want to, because you were there more, but Troy's talked about with Rise, the story was a little more first, and then Liquid came. But with
Okay.
Moonlight Mayhem, the Liquid kind of matched up, and he developed the story. Now he had the concept of the world we created with werewolves being the dominant species and a little bit of a Romeo and Juliet. But
Mhm.
that as we found the Liquid, he was able, and with Charlie's help, because they do all that creative, they were. I think the bourbon came. It's not a first place in a second, but they kind of
Yeah.
meld. But I think the Rise of Robots story was a little more thought about before liquid, and the liquid helped finish off the Moonlight Mayhem story.
Okay. And I guess that goes back to like Troy's favorite movie or the movie he watched growing up. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, I've done my
Yeah.
homework. Yeah, I know that bit. Okay. So and how did you so you had werewolves there's this like forbidden love archetype. Like how did that fit well with the bourbon?
Yeah, we kind of weave the two together. So on our website, we have some of the excerpts from the script. We when we develop these out, we tend to go down the path of writing not an entire screenplay, but we'll generally write an outline, and then we may write a few scenes. And in the case of this one, it ended up that the wolf pack all kind of hang out at this bar on Sunset Strip, and
Yeah.
it was a it was a whiskey bar. And it that's kind of where the bourbon came into it is, as we were kind of developing out this wolf pack and where they hung out and what they were drinking. Again, that's where the whiskey came into play. It's not like, none of them are stumbling around with, well, there's a guy actually on the label with a bottle, but none of them are wandering around with a bottle in hand or anything like that, right? But yeah, it was just kind of this, kind of just this general vibe of their it's literally called the den, right? The den
Yeah.
where the wolf pack hangs out. These werewolves hang out is a great whiskey bar, and that kind of just led to the kind of the feel and the theme of where like where they're hanging out and enjoying things. But kind of behind it all is this Romeo and Juliet story of, the human boy next
Yeah.
door, and the werewolf girl that he falls in love with, whose you know older brother is the head of this wolf pack and hates humans, and it all kind of goes from there.
So
Yeah,
so
Mike, and
Steve, you were
you could see this is the extended cut here, which is that same story, but then we've released Moonlight Mayhem 2 now, and I don't want to get away from what we're drinking, but
no.
this is our first product that's finished, so it's finished in white
Yeah.
port wine barrels, and the two main characters that Charlie just talked about to escape the brother fled Southern California and ended up in Napa Valley, where they ended up in a
Nice.
wine. They're in a winery, and on the label you could see them, and they run into a famous werewolf called the White Wolf.
Oh,
So
cool.
their creative minds taking these stories further and further. I just sit back in awe sometimes, just assuming the same way Charlie does when he sees a great spreadsheet I've created.
Exactly.
Just mesmerized.
Yeah.
No, I love the continuity between them, and I don't mind getting away because the white port I thought it was an interesting choice for a first finish because it's not often used by many brands, and I actually I love a white port finish. Now I've only had several, but it's one that I feel like I wish was used more. So maybe you could even speak really quickly of all the finishes you could do. Why was white port the first one?
Yeah, it was a kind of a combination of happenstance and intentional. So we knew we wanted to do a finished product, and we were looking kind of across the industry at available finishing barrels. And there were a lot of to your point, there were a lot of the common finishing barrels available. And then we came across a bunch of white port barrels, and we were like, well, that's kind of interesting. And so we all ran out and bought a bunch of white port and tried that. And we were like, huh, I wonder what this would do with the profile. And kind of played with it. And in the end, we all agreed that this is something a little out of the ordinary, which is what we like. We like to be that if we can, and would bring something a little bit different to the table. And so we went ahead and got those white port barrels, put the whiskey into it, and started aging it. And like kind of the longer it sat and the more we sampled it, we're like, whoa, this is
Yeah.
working really well. And kind of the longer it sat, the more excited we got right up until the day that we bottled it. And we were all just like bonkers, like, wow, this turned out really great. So yeah, it was really born of wanting to do something a little bit different. But then when we found that, being like, okay, we feel like this is gonna taste great, like not just be different, but be really good as well. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of how we landed on the white port.
Yeah, I have a atomizer I use for when I make a Sazerac. Uh, kind of atomize the absinthe into the glass and strain
Mm.
it in. And so I bought some white port, put it in my atomizer, squirt it in a glass, got our
Oh,
Moonlight
smart.
Mayhem that we're drinking now and kind of swish it around. I mean, I knew that wasn't going to be what it was like, but
Yeah.
just do little experiments to make sure that it's almost looking for something bad, like, you know, because the good will come, but I just want to make sure there was nothing. I didn't have a lot of experience with white port, so I started playing with it. And you know, one squirt, five squirts, whatever, just kind of messing around. And every time I did it, I'm like, these flavors mesh like apple pie and ice cream almost. Like
Yeah.
it's the vanilla and that kind of tartness, and it just started. I got so into it. Now it's nothing against tawny port casks or ruby
Mhm.
port casks or other wine casks. I have a lot of whiskey that's finished in red wine, and it's not that we were trying to be different for different sake. We just found flavors that excited us, and that's how we kind of move forward with it.
Yeah, what I enjoyed with white port finishes when I got into it, because again, so I at the beginning I mentioned I'm Italian, my other half is Portuguese. So port has been at the table probably before I should even been sipping on port. But I didn't know about white port. And so when I saw like a first white port finish, I was super curious, but I always think about like I think of always like a musical background, like bottom end and low end, but those like high end flavors, like the bright flavors, I feel get really amplified with the white port as opposed to where like the like your ruby port might kind of like deepen the lower end, which
Yeah,
again, time and place for whatever you want. But I,
absolutely.
even without tasting it, I'm enjoying that we're talking about it because I can see how when you have a strong foundation like this here, if you start playing with like elevating some of those top flavors and a little bit more of like that green grape nuance influence in there, no wonder it's also done really well and is killing it with reviews and awards as well. So
Yeah, and the beauty is the liquid we use to start is the same barrel, not the exact same purchase lot, but around the same barrels we bought for the Moonlight Mayhem that we're sampling. And we
yeah,
never put anything in a bottle that's under 4 years old. So the Moonlight Mayhem, we don't put an age statement on, but it's going to be four or more, 4 or 5,
yeah,
probably some is even up in the high fives, the low sixes. But it was some of those same batches that we took to put into the white port wine barrels, and they were 7 years old by the time they came out, right? So, and they'd been in the white port wine barrels for 8 or 9 months. So it's a little more aged whiskey too, and that
mm,
appeals to people. So I think we put on that label that 7 year old bourbon aged in white port wine barrels.
yeah. And the one thing I do not envy is talking to a few people who've done finishing is I wouldn't know when to pull the trigger. Like you said, because you're like, oh, you hear these stories about it's getting so good, it's getting so good, and all of a sudden, like one day
Yeah,
you're like, it's not so good. So
yeah,
it really is, I guess, finicky, I guess, and having your finger on the pulse. Obviously, you guys pulled out at a good time, but yeah, I just feel like it's always been the most daunting. I don't even do it for a living, but hearing people like, yeah, we're gonna put a whole lot of good whiskey that we have in these finishing barrels, and then we're just gonna kind of play it by palette over time, I think is a kind of a
yeah.
huge risk, right?
It is huge, and it varies. It goes in peaks and valleys. It's not linear.
Hmm.
And we had a time where we tasted it and loved it, and we gave it a little more time, and it actually got a little bit worse, and then it
Yeah, I've
got
heard
way
that.
better. So we got lucky. I mean, lucky and calculated risk, but it doesn't follow a pattern when it's resting.
Yeah.
So we're tasting it often, and you gotta. It is. It's another thing we're all learning as we go along, but are checking each other on and talking through it the whole time.
I think this is a good segue in terms of like finishing into, I wanted to ask you guys about in horror, there's always like these like ridiculous tropes, right? These things that get played out. It's like, yeah, she runs up the stairs instead of out the front door. In the whiskey space, is there like a trend or a stereotype or like an approach that we'll keep it kosher, but like that you maybe you're not a fan of or you wish was done differently, or just one that you think even Filmland wouldn't touch? And it could be like a finishing, a typical finishing.
I have one, Charlie, unless you're excited to
No,
say.
I'm curious to hear what you say. I'm gonna let you step in it first. You go.
Hot takes,
Well,
here we go.
so it's never to offend any. I want everyone to drink what they enjoy. So if I
Yes.
say something, obviously it's for people listening. It's all about your personal taste. But I'm not a fan of flavored whiskey.
Mm.
And it's not because I don't. I mean, we just talked about finishing in a white port wine barrel, so you're getting a flavor. but I never feel that I think flavor should be natural, and adding, blackberry flavoring or peach flavoring that doesn't taste like natural blackberry or natural peach. It tastes like the blackberry or peach fluoride my dentist gave me to kind of clean my teeth when I was young. It's got a fake taste to it.
Yeah.
Now, if you had a barrel that, peaches were aged in and you put some whiskey in it, I'd probably be a bigger fan of it. But just injecting flavor into whiskey for um, sugary sales sake is probably the
Yeah.
trend that I don't appreciate and I don't think we'll ever do, or maybe the day I resign. I don't know.
So, luckily, Steve and I are aligned. I had the exact same thing in my head. It's again, not to it's a trend, and there's a place for it in the market, right? Like a lot of people like a flavored whiskey. So to each their own. It's just not something I think that we would do because none of at least the three of us that do the blending, none of us. It doesn't really appeal to any of us. So I'd be like. There would have to be just like somebody banging on the door to convince us to do it. It's just yeah, it's not really our thing. Finishing totally different bag, like Steve mentioned, but at making dill pickle bourbon isn't on any of our list or what, not,
There
not
was
something we
a,
want
I
to
saw like a Cheetos one once that was a couple of years ago that came
do.
out. So you guys like using the cinema terminology. If your whiskey, or whether it be a particular bottle or in general, had like a director's commentary track, what's something about the process that people would never notice or know unless you pointed it out? I guess something that in the background that you feel is like really important to the brand, that maybe doesn't get as recognized, like simply being put in bottle.
um,
Gosh,
yeah, I
Steve,
can
jump
start,
in. I'm gonna
Charlie.
have to like
Yeah, I can.
mull on this for a second. I'm like,
Yeah,
like,
so I'd say we have a broad audience in mind.
Hmm.
Because if you look at our complete offering, we didn't just think about ourselves. So in terms of a director who has a certain style of movie that they love and they make it 100% for their viewing pleasure.
Hmm.
And it's not a criticism, like a Stanley Kubrick, right? I mean, that his movies are kind of got a certain theme to them, and obviously it matches his mind. But there's other directors who make it understanding there might be children watching it and 75-year-old adults watching it, and you kind of
Hmm.
got to appeal to multiple audience. Now, I don't know, any one movie does that by that director, but they put out over time enough. We're doing that with our whiskey, right? We're thinking about a broad audience. We want people who are new to whiskey or in their first several years of it to enjoy our 94 proofs and kind of get into uh, a bourbon with a little more proof, but maybe they're used to drinking 80 and 85s and they kind of get into the 90s, or maybe they start experimenting with rye because they've never really enjoyed a rye, and then we keep going up to the folks like us who've been drinking it for decades, sad to say, but and really like something that the flavor profiles and maybe even a little bit of the alcohol burn or feeling of it. Um, we really enjoy, and that's kind of for the enthusiast. We have part of that wide audience is we had people early on saying, well, if you only had stuff from Kentucky, we know you got it from Indiana. So we had our first special release was a 9-year-old Kentucky bourbon that we procured some fantastic barrels from a distiller in Kentucky, and the movie theme was time travel, so there was no horror
Ah,
involved whatsoever. It
yeah.
was a time travel story of it starts in the future, and wood is scarce, and so we're not allowed to age whiskey in wood. So these brother and sister create a time travel machine, and they go back in time. And it's brother and sister or cousins, I forget. Charlie, you know the story better, but it's a man and a woman. They go back in time and they get some bourbon from the past, and they bring it back to their time to enjoy it. So
That's
that was,
awesome.
that was fun. And then we have a superhero themed one. So Quadra-Force is a blend of 4 different bourbons from 4 different states, from 4 different distilleries, not Indiana. So we divulged 3 of those states: California, Kentucky, Tennessee. The fourth state is a mystery because we created 4 superheroes.
So cool.
And the fourth superhero is called Mr. Mysterian. And we don't say where that state is from, but there's 4 labels. The whiskey inside is all the same, but it was kind of a way to people to enjoy that genre. So that's when I talk about appealing to a wide audience. It's not only the proofing and the flavors, but it's also the offerings that we put out there and the stories we tell.
it taps so well into the nostalgia and interesting you mentioned kind of like where you've brought like these other stories in because a good friend of mine Ben owns Fright Rags so they're like the leading horror t-shirt apparel company out there but if you look at the catalog they have Terminator, Back to the Future, some superhero stuff because I feel like that's the stuff a lot of us grew up on. It's a lot of the same comfort stories that we've heard. And so the fact that you're kind of encompassing a little bit of everything with these stories you tell, I think is awesome because obviously I'm a little bit biased. I'm like, oh, there was a werewolf bourbon. Like that's why I joked in my post where it was kind of like I think it was kind of offered like, hey, like when you guys reached out, it was like, what do you want to try first? And I was like, werewolves and bourbon, like, and then I kind of kicked myself, but luckily you guys were kind enough to send me the rye, which I didn't make it here tonight. I'm very disappointed, but I heard about Rise of the Robots, and everyone was sure to tell me. Trust me, anyone who's familiar with Filmland, when I got this, I was like, oh, I love this bourbon, but you haven't tried the rye. And I was like,
Cool.
with
Yeah.
like the sorry, Charlie, go on before I.
No, I was just going to say one of the things that we've tried to do here is even though we have this mid-century kind of aesthetic, it kind of has this broad appeal to the point that both of you were just making, right? So there are people who, we've run into some older folks, even maybe older than Steve and I, who are like, "Oh my God, I had posters just like that on my bedroom when I was a kid or whatever."
Yeah,
But then we've run into, some young 20-year-olds who are like, "Oh my God, this is so cool. I just love the look and feel of it." And, like I want that poster in my bedroom now. So it's interesting how even though it kind of has, this 50 or plus kind of feel to it, it it kind of vibes with everybody, young and old, male and female. We've seen women react really, as well to it as men. So yeah, we've been lucky in that and intentional in that it's kind of got this broad appeal. Going back to Steve Spielberg, you didn't say Spielberg, but that's who in my head is like a director that kind of does
Yeah.
something that can
I mean, yeah,
appeal to the masses, right? Like,
yeah. I think that's a great. It's a good example. Yeah.
yeah. When you mentioned Kubrick, I was like laughing because of the whole war between him and Stephen King and and the source material. But yeah, Spielberg, great example. You guys are like the Spielbergs, where I feel like the movies he puts out, no matter where he kind of delves into, there's such a wide reach. Um, because usually it's just really well done and it's feel good. So, um,
right.
one of the things that I wanted to ask you guys, the artwork. Do you have like a resident artist? Is there someone you go to? Because it seems obviously there's a consistency in the mid-century like pulp style.
Yeah, we've actually used a few different artists.
Wow.
So yeah, we have a stable of artists that we've worked with over the last few years. I think the artist that we've worked with most recently is the first artist we've had to do two labels in a row, and actually the second label is for a product that we haven't released yet. But we yeah the I think Moonlight Mayhem and Rise had some common development between them, but had some different, like at the end of the day, had some different artwork between them. In between, we've had a few different artists, and then yeah, Moonlight Mayhem 2, and then this future release, both leverage this newer artist that we've been working with, and he's amazing. He literally hand painted everything. I
Wow.
think we have stuff on the website that you get, but he's an older gentleman, doesn't work in digital at all. Literally everything was hand sketched, hand painted, and then we had to digitize the final artwork to be
That's
able to take
crazy.
it to print for the labels. So it's kind of over Steve's shoulder there. But when you get your hands on a bottle of Moonlight Mayhem 2 and you look at the artwork for that, it was all done by hand on canvas. So
And no wonder it looks that good because I was when I got the bottle in and one of the things I appreciated was I have a book of like old movie posters and I've gone to like where I am the museum had a huge exhibit of like classic horror posters. It was from Kirk Hammett from Metallica actually. He has like one of the biggest collections
it's
in
awesome.
the world and going through and seeing that stuff like when I got your bottle it didn't feel like this like kind of corny reproduction of the style. Like it felt really authentic. And then you find out that someone's painting it. Like you know what I mean? Like it's just like that, like these labels that someone's painting them and then you have to digitize them. So just again,
Yep.
there's details like that where having been in the space long enough, you just have to appreciate that level of detail. Again, back to your like, there's definitely not like this quick money grab. Like, we spend too much on glass. We pay artists to paint pictures. Nowhere in there is in the spreadsheet for Steve. There is like the quick money.
No, no, and it may seem counterintuitive as a finance guy, but I'm a whiskey lover more than that. And
Yeah.
the money, the doing the finances of the job is a necessity and it's important. And I care about our investors, and I'll always do my fiduciary responsibility. But for us to succeed, we can't be cutting corners like that. We have to prove to everybody that what's in the bottle is the most important thing, and we'll have fun with the outside. But what we're putting in there that we want people to enjoy is by far the most important aspect of this. And we will spend the proper money to make sure that people's experience is a good one.
And with that being said, with the money you're putting into it, the price tag is pretty fair. Like this, the Moonlight Mayhem is what, 59.99, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but
It, yeah, so we don't get
54.99
oh
yeah,
wow.
yeah, 50, so we don't get to set
SRP.
the final price,
I
but we
guess
have an
yeah.
MSRP. Yeah.
Yeah.
So MSRP.
And if you're grabbing this at 54.99, it's like a no-brainer. And like I said, even if the first thing that draws you in is the art because you're like, cool, I'm new to bourbon, or I just want a cool conversation piece on my bar, that's awesome. But I feel like there'll be longevity in the customer because like other brands would do something like this and be like, well, there's hand painted art on here and it's a limited edition and now it's $150 and really played up and the bottle's beautiful. And the fact that you can go to the store, assuming that they honor the MSRP and get that for 54.99, to me, I'd grab that all day. If I'm going to have a party over the holidays, I'm definitely grabbing a few more bottles just because I know they'll appeal to the wide audience, like you said, in terms of different palettes and whatnot. But also the price is right. Like I'm gonna buy a few bottles and put on table. You don't feel bad. Like when you have that price point, like I want to sip it tonight. I'm enjoying it, but I don't feel bad if my friend blasphemously pours Coke into.
Yeah, yeah, I got no, it makes sense. And that's. I mean, when I said we were thinking about a wide audience, I mean, if someone wants Coke in their bourbon,
Yeah.
and we saw them putting Moonlight Mayhem and some Coke, none of us would be upset. I mean, we want people to enjoy it. I think it's a good segue also to mention that right now for our holiday promotion, we have a free shipping offer, and our MSRP is on our website. So it's like
Mm.
going to the liquor store and getting it that price versus having to pay shipping on it. So it's similar. And then some liquor stores that participate, there's a $5 off tag hanging on the shelf near our
Wow.
bottles. So you can get it down under $50 if you happen to be at one of those liquor stores. We're in 19 states, brick and mortar stores. We're online in 48. So, and right now, because of the holiday, it's holiday 25, Charlie, if I'm not mistaken, the code, but it's on our
Yep.
website. So
Yeah, holiday 25.
filmlandspirits.com. It's one of the first things that comes up. Also, if you sign up for our email, you get 10% off any order right away. So there's ways to even get it cheaper than what you're saying. But
Yeah.
I think our website is actually fun just to explore for
It
these
is.
movie concepts we've talked about. Even if you're not into drinking, but you just want to watch some cool trailers and kind of into the aesthetic, it's a really fun website. We don't, if you sign up for the email, we don't spam. We send out one or two a month, and it's basically deals. So it's ways
Yeah.
to get some money off, or hey, something's coming new. That's typically what our emails are about. But it's not like you're getting one a day telling you to run to the store and buy us. So if
Right.
for those listeners who want to check it out, filmlandspirits.com.
I can attest to how fun the website is, by the way. Like doing my homework and jumping into it. Easy to navigate. Again, all the curated experience behind it is awesome. And then, you know, shipping is always the big one, right? If someone's like, oh, it's $55 a ball, but now I'm spending 15, $20. With this deal, I'm assuming it's running throughout the holiday season.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I'd say that the one caveat, if I didn't say it the first time, is free shipping on two bottles or more. It's not on a single bottle.
Well, don't be like me and just go with the bourbon first. Get the bourbon and the rye,
Yeah, it's a great
and
deal.
yeah, get that free shipping on the bourbon and the rye. Um, before we get to wrapping up here, I paired this with the Monster Squad. Now, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Monster Squad, but to me, it was the 80s. It was nostalgia. The connection first was that the movie poster, seeing it in the stores or the video stores growing up, really spoke to me. And I kind of talked about pre-internet. You don't know. You're just looking at the poster. Same way, I guess you're walking in the bourbon aisle. If you didn't like look anything up, you're just what speaks to you. Okay, so it was the poster parallel first. But when I think about like in Monster Squad, there's Wolfman. It's funny, they had to work around the Universal monsters so they didn't get sued. So
Right.
you have like Wolfman and Frankenstein has the bolts, I think, coming out of like his like temples instead of his neck. And they just moved things around. But it's so fun. And when I thought about this bottle, I was like, there's so many werewolf movies I really enjoy. But for the bottle, I was like Monster Squad, even though it's all the monsters and not primarily werewolves. That's the reason I went for it. So, Steve, I know you're a horror guy. When I got the email about you jumping on here, I know you're a fan. So even though you weren't the writer per se when the guys were starting out, is there a favorite werewolf movie you have?
So I thought about that you'd ask this question, and I actually watched some of your other podcasts. I really enjoyed the
Nice.
one with the wonderful woman from Bardstown Bourbon Company who loved werewolves.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, she was amazing. So and my answer is going to maybe be a little disappointing 'cause it's a vampire movie, but I love the Underworld franchise, and
Oh, that's an
the
awesome answer.
reason
Yeah.
the reason it fits is because it's a mix of humans and monsters, vampires in this case, but who, where there's werewolves involved in it, and
Hmm.
just the Romeo and Juliet theme and kind of the human and monster theme, and the first one to me was the best, but they kept on, and the werewolf became more prominent as the
Yeah.
series went along. So the Underworld franchise to me is a good pairing with this bottle.
Steve, I think that's like the sleeper answer where like, there's a lot of obvious routes you could have went and no, I think that's an awesome pairing. I might consult you the next time I put one of these together. How about you, Charlie?
Happy to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love Steve's answer. I love both your answers actually. I haven't thought of Monster Squad in a very, very, very long time. I'm like, oh my God. Um, to me, the quintessential like werewolf movie, and it's kind of an easy answer, but to me, it is by far the best werewolf movie ever made, is An American Werewolf in London. I just, like
Yeah.
I love it. I think it's about as perfect of a werewolf movie as you can get. As a pairing goes, it is a great werewolf movie. It's not necessarily a love story per se, at least not in the sense that we've leaned into. But I think it took that kind of universal, like old school werewolf, Lon Chaney werewolf, and turned it on its head and gave it a modern feel. At least in the 80s, for the 80s, it was a modern feel. And I watched it maybe a year or two ago, and it still holds up pretty good.
It
So
does.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
revisit
That's
that one
as
myself.
Yeah, as werewolf movies go, that's the one that I would hang my hat on, and plus it most of it's set in like like cold and dank London, so
Yeah.
a nice pour would go well with it too. So
What's the name? The bar. The bar that they drink at. I forget the name of it, but um,
oh
anyways, but yeah, I think of like Rick Baker's transformation scene. Like that's like becoming like the extended cut right there. I think of like extended cut
Yep.
and
yeah,
and that transformation is just so epic. And I think he was like the first to win was it an Oscar for it too for the effects on that, which is
It was
awesome.
unbelievable.
Yeah. So gentlemen, before we wrap up, you've teased that there's some releases on the horizon. I know you probably can't speak to anything. Is there anything else that you want to speak to, mention, kind of make the audience aware before we take off here?
um, we've just expanded into Texas, so for anybody that's listening in the fine state of Texas, please keep an eye out for us in bars and restaurants there. Here in my home state of Georgia, we're still relatively new and have been expanding our footprint here as well. And also up in your direction, like New York, New Jersey are
Yeah.
still relatively new markets for us as well. So I would say with those being relatively recent for us, I would encourage anybody in those markets or visiting.
Yeah.
If you're going to New York for the holidays, please feel free to keep an eye out in your favorite liquor store and bars and restaurants. Beyond that, yeah, like we always are innovating. I think Steve mentioned it earlier. We have our core products, and then we like to do something different once or twice a year, kind of dependent upon the schedule. Um, so we can't really tease a whole lot more, but there is something sitting in barrels right now, waiting for the right opportunity. The
Nice.
concept it is one where chicken and egg, the concept and the what's actually in the bottle kind of came together, kind
Nice.
of in a very harmonious kind of way. And I'll say it's different from anything else that we've done so far. And we'll
Okay.
kind of Steve can keep teasing, but I'll leave the tease at
Yeah.
that at least. Like,
No, I think you did a good job going forward. I'll go backwards a little bit. So we've done three special of those special releases, and we talked about Moonlight Mayhem 2, right there being the continuation of that bourbon. I mentioned the superhero one, just to kind of look at those bottles a little bit. Quadriforce. These are still available. We released this a little less than a year ago, but these are still on shelves. Total Wine has this. Other liquor stores have this. And just as an
Nice.
example, another one of the superheroes. So there's four of those heroes. So there's four bottles to collect, but the liquid is the exact same inside, and it's got one of the four bourbons is a wheated bourbon, so it's a 4 grain
Nice.
whiskey in there, and you can, if you're into wheated bourbons, you can definitely pick up on that. And then Moonlight Mayhem 2 is the one we just released, and that's out everywhere in the places Charlie mentioned. So I'd say those are kind of the current things that we're still really enjoying the glow and aftermath of
Yeah.
launching and enjoying. And then the one that would come in 2026, I'm very excited about, as excited as anything I've been, because it is going to be really fun from both an experimental flavor and an experimental theme of the bottle, and it's going to be a
Nice.
blast.
Well,
I, I
sorry, go Charlie.
well, I was just gonna add, like again, Steve is a fantastic hype man. I'm gonna add a layer to it, and that is
Okay.
with Quadriforce, what we tried to kind of do is take this trading card or almost like a Pokemon approach in that there
Yeah.
are four different labels and four different bottles. And it can be hard to find them all depending upon what mix went into a retail store. There's no guarantee that a 12 pack is going to get, like all four labels.
Yeah.
It's not that intentional. If you go on our website, the 4 pack that we sell gets you all four labels. So
Yeah.
it's a way to get the instant collection. Since Steve brought it up, I just got to point out that like it's the one way that you can be assured of getting all four labels is if you buy the 4 pack on our site, and get free shipping as well.
Well, all I know is that Blanton's horse toppers are so like yesteryear, and like I'm going,
Yeah.
I'm going for Quadriforce trading cards. Okay. Um,
Yeah, and that one got a really Quadriforce got an amazing rating in Wine Enthusiast magazine, which typically is a little harder on whiskeys than they are on their wines, but they gave us a 96, I believe, rating
wow.
on Quadriforce. So we were very excited. It's received very good reviews both when they see the bottle and when they don't see the bottle. So and it is very unique. It's we say we'll never make it again because we cannot replicate it. Now, will we ever do another 4 grain? Will we
Hmm.
do 40? But we'll never be able to make that whiskey again because the
No.
barrels we bought at that time and place,
Yep.
um, they're either we have a few of them left and they're aging, or we used all the ones we bought. So it's an
Yeah.
unreplicatable, awesome whiskey.
It's great to see because you did it the right way and the authentic way that I feel like you have your core products and then you could just have fun with some of these other releases. Like you have
Yeah,
like your four core products and then anything you venture off or like the one you're teasing, which it's good reason that you know what the Rise I didn't get it out here in time for tonight. You have new releases coming. It's more reason that we do this again sometime. And now that
absolutely.
we have introductions out of the way, we can just taste through and have have some more fun with this. But gentlemen, thank you both for doing this. I appreciate it, and I think what you're doing is phenomenal, and I'm such a fan. And if you haven't tried Filmland Spirits, whether you're a whiskey novice or you're an expert or wherever level you're at, I feel like there's an entry point in there and the whiskey's phenomenal. So I can't say enough good things for those who are listening and watching, aside from the regular like, subscribe, listen, I want to know if you've tasted any Filmland spirits and if there's a particular expression that you enjoy the most. Do you have the whole Quadriforce card lineup? You can let us know. And with that being said, gentlemen, I'm gonna finish off this drink. Cheers, and thank you
Cheers.
so much for coming on.
Cheers.